All right, so I'm excited to be here today with Wyshmaster Beats. So Wysh is a Grammy-nominated, multi-platinum selling music producer. He's one of the pioneers of online leasing. He has worked with artists like Twista, Pitbull, Nelly, Rick Ross, 2 Chainz, Lil Wayne, and many more. And he's active in the song pitching for artists, labels, TV, music, games. And
Mhm.
he's someone that, I think is absolutely slaying it right now, in his domain in terms of who he works with, and also he's someone that I'm looking forward to having a conversation with just about the current status of the music industry and where things are headed. And in particular with AI and music generation tools, I think it's an interesting time to be alive and sort of
Right.
witness how is that going to affect your world, especially and music licensing as a whole. So,
Right.
Wish, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. It's awesome. I think we did this,
Hmm.
like 2 years ago, maybe?
It's
I
been a
think our
hot
last interview.
minute. It's been
Yeah.
too long. Yeah. So maybe to kick things off, could you just share a brief introduction about how you got started and found your way to collaborating with artists like Pitbull and 2 Chainz and Lil Wayne?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do a short version, but I basically am from Chicago. I was into like house music and hip hop, and I had a love for music because my parents used to just constantly play music in the car. So I knew I wanted to be in music. I just didn't know where. So my first place I went was a DJ. So I started DJing like house parties and did some clubs. And it was, I think I forgot, I was at a really big club and I played a song. I forgot the song was called, but it just drew everybody to the dance floor. And then I
The
remember just having
Macarena.
this, yeah, yeah, it was, no, you know what it was? It was I don't know if you guys remember the dip. When I dip, you dip, we
Mm.
dip. It was a huge song.
There we go.
Um, and then I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to just play the music that's making these people move on the dance floor. I want to create the music. So from
Mm.
that day forward, I was like, I was really into like Timberland, Dr. Dre, Neptunes, and and 3 6 Mafia, which is yeah, it's like a little different. But I decided I wanted to be a producer, so I bought my first keyboard and I just started making beats. There, we didn't have YouTube and all the things we have right now to be able
Mm.
to show us how to create these things. So I just kind of like listened to my favorite producers, started creating. And I loved it so much that I would just do it every day. Like I would just constantly be in my parents' basement, just like knocking out beats. And the first probably 100 pretty terrible, but I think after I got to maybe 100, they started sounding pretty good. And I decided I had some like friends that were like, like, hey, they were rapping, and then I had some other, their friends of rap. So I was like, I started a record label, like a little record label in my parents' basement because I had a little studio set up. And we just started, doing shows, and I started putting stuff out. And then I was doing security at the time, and I remember I basically would just sit at a computer all day and just make sure people don't walk away with computers. As a computer college. So I'm like, I'm going to see if a desktop computer comes out the front door, right? So I basically started searching online and looking for like what do producers do, right? So I found this website. It was called mp3.com, which is like the first SoundClick. If you guys are familiar with SoundClick. And producers would just put their beats online and they would get paid per their streams. So I was like, all right, that's cool. And I had like probably 50 beats. I'm like, I'm just going to throw all that shit up there, right? So I put 50 beats up and I started getting some streams as people started liking my stuff, and I started getting paid. I got my first check was like $50 or something. I was like, man, I got $50 just from putting my beats on this site. So I just kept doing it. And then one day they stopped paying people to do it. And then I remember a funny story. I remember sitting in my parents' basement and playing my music like for probably like a weekend straight. Like every second I would just keep playing my stuff because I'm like, I'm getting paid for this. I did not know about, cookies and IP addresses. So I pretty much spent hours playing my stuff, and only one, would count per day. So I decided from there, because they stopped paying us, I was like, oh wait, I have they had like a internal like messaging system, right? Like an email thing. And I went in there and I had like all these messages from like different artists, and they're like, hey, how much do you want for this beat? Or I love your beats. And I was like, all right, and look it up. And I'm like, all right, this guy wants to buy this beat. And I'm like, all right, I didn't really know about like exclusive rights or any of that stuff. So I was like, all right, I guess you just sell it outright. So I sold my first beat outright. I looked at my phone bill, it was $50. So I was like, all right, $50. So I sold my first beat for $50. And then from there, I just kept going through messages and putting up more beats, and then people would just constantly just message me and saying, "Hey, like, how much do you want for this?" I probably got up to like $3,000 per beat, and that was just from independent artists. And I was killing it, and I decided to quit my job as security and just do music full time. And then from there, the economy hit, I remember, and people didn't have as much money. So like it was selling exclusive rights. Like it got down to like, $400 or $500 and artists would complain and be like, dude, I can't afford this. So that's when I came up with the idea for licensing. I'm like, well, why don't I just sell the same beats over and over again, give them the license power. It doesn't kill their budget and they can still make money. I still make money and we're all happy. When I started doing that is when my fan base just blew up. I mean, different countries everywhere around the world were just messaging me like, dude, you're the best. And like just buying my stuff up because I could afford it. Right. So from there, that's when I started getting notices by bigger artists and bigger companies. And I remember my first big gig was Midway Games. And I got emailed by that guy, John Beniaki, who was running I forgot exactly his position, but he was doing the video game. He's like, hey man, I got this one of a kind video game. It's called NBA Ballers. And it's different than any other game. You play basketball, but you also live the lifestyle of a basketball player and you like upgrade your chains, your mansions, your cars and all that stuff. I was like, that sounds cool. So they happened to be in Chicago, which is cool. So he took me on a tour and he's like, we want this to be like real underground. I know you're really big online. So I end up doing like 25 beats and like 5 songs. And I got a check for like 25,000. So that was like my first big, check from a big company. So it was pretty exciting. And then from there, I started working with like Ludacris. I worked on his Disturb the Peace album. And then I got noticed by a rapper named Nelly out of St. Louis. And then his production company wanted to sign me. So I ended up moving to St. Louis, working with him full time. And then I started getting noticed by other people. So I was just getting that's when you see all these like different placements I had. They just start coming in. And then I did a song called I'm on a Boat by the Lonely Island that happened to be, I was in Nelly's studio. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So it was a pretty big song. And that was just like a situation where I happened to be at Nelly's studio and there's somebody coming through looking for beats from Universal Republic. And I ended up giving them that and ended up being I'm on a Boat. And then from there, I just kept, growing and growing. I moved to Los Angeles and then I got into education and I wrote the first beat making program for a college in St. Louis. So yeah, and I've done a lot of stuff since then. I don't want to go too crazy into the story, but yeah.
Hey, dude, that's awesome. Well, congratulations on your success, and yeah, I love hearing stories like that in full detail because like the transformation, is so huge from when you just started out and you're in your parents' basement making those songs. Right. Yeah, I'd be curious, for you, if you could go back in time and you could go back to yourself when you just got started, maybe at like your most rock bottom challenging moment. I don't know if you remember what that was for you.
Oh, there's tons of them.
Yeah. So whatever that was for you, if you could give yourself one piece of advice based on what you know now, what would you share with yourself back when
I would just say, don't listen to what people tell you, the ones that you're supposed to listen to, like these high-end managers supposedly or entertainment lawyers sometimes, they give you the wrong information. My biggest mistake in my career is I stopped doing online stuff. So when that all started happening, I was like, I still had my online business, but I was like, man, I want to work with big artists. Like, this is cool. I enjoy it, but this is like, this is my dream. And I remember I had management in LA and they're like, dude, you got to quit that shit. Like, you don't want to be known as an online producer. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be known as an online producer. Like, that sucks. So I stopped doing it. And now to this day, I'm like, oh my God, if I would have kept my SEO going on my website and still had beats online, I mean, it'd be insane what I would have, you know what I mean? And do the offline stuff. And I'm like, what is a online producer anyway? I'm like, why did that even bother me? Like, I'm sitting there like, online producer, like, who gives a shit? Like, but back then it's like they made me feel like it was a small thing to do. And I think I have learned that I've listened to so many people giving me the wrong information and just try to guide me to do just, what they think is right instead of me just following my heart and knowing what was right. So,
man, that's really powerful. That's some really good advice. Yeah. How do you distinguish between, because sometimes feedback is good and sometimes constructive feedback is right, and you want to be open-minded and kind of learn from other people. How do you distinguish between the type of advice that, like you're describing, is sort of like people downplaying something that in your gut or in your heart is right, versus something that actually is a good piece of advice that maybe is worth considering?
So I guess it just depends on the person and like, what is your, where's this coming from? Is this like, did you just blast music out there and all of a sudden a bunch of people are like started sending you hate mail or something like that's, that's a different where I'm like, That's different feedback, because there's people that have personal problems going in their life. And I'm sure you notice with like, we have email lists, and when we send stuff out, you get people like, I just posted something. Some dude told me to go kill myself. Right. And I'm just giving away free beats. And he's like, go kill yourself. And I'm like, that wouldn't be constructive criticism. Right. It's like, and you are going to get people that are going to hate on you, especially like as artists and in music. And you can't take that personally. But if you're talking to someone, let's say like Michael, who's in the music business, and you trust his opinion, and he says, hey man, I like your song, but I would try maybe some different production, or maybe try a harmony here or something, that would be constructive criticism. They're like, okay, I'm going to take that to heart. I trust his judgment. I know what he does. You know what I mean? Or if I'm working with an artist or a producer in the studio or something, I know they're not there to be like, try to put me down. You know what I mean? They're there to make music. We all eat, right? Whatever we create. That would be the constructive criticism that I would take in, of course. So I guess it just depends on your environment and where it's coming from.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know in particular, like one of the points you just spoke to is really relevant to all of us as artists around criticism, or like putting something out, and the trolls. Like the trolls, especially on the internet, they come out. And
of course.
How do you recommend? Yeah, we touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear going a little bit deeper on this, because I know this is like a big pain point for a lot of our artists, is dealing with negativity, or dealing with trolls, or feedback, even if it's from people who are just literally like, go kill yourself. Like obviously that's real bad.
Yeah, right.
I think
exactly.
Most people are like, okay, they generally, hopefully, we don't take that too much to heart. But especially with some artists who are earlier on, in their journey, when they're still discovering their voice, they're still, you mentioned how at the beginning of your journey, like all of us, you made a bunch of beats, and a lot of them weren't very good. You were kind of figuring out your voice and how to get better at it. And I'm curious, how do you recommend that artists, look at trolls, or look at negative feedback that they get, in particular if it's feedback that really just kind of cuts through? Because in some cases, like, there might be an ounce of truth to some of the things that people are saying. That's part of what makes it challenging to face sometimes. But also, it's like it's not something to dwell on or to take personally, right?
So basically, you have to put your music out there, right? You can't just let it sit there, or you're not doing anything. You're just gonna have regrets. You know what I mean? So like, if I took any, like even some of the beats I wasn't unsure of, even after that 100, there's some in there I'm like, I don't know. But if I didn't try, I wouldn't know what was going to do good or whatnot. You know what I mean? As an artist, when you're putting your music, you put your music out there. If you are getting a lot of negative feedback, it's either your audience is horrible and they're not meant for you. You know what I mean? Are you making music for like, alternative Nirvana type, or do you make Nirvana type music and you have a bunch of rappers that are following you or listening to you? That would be like, they don't listen to that stuff, right? Or are you doing like hardcore hip hop and you're giving it to like some people that are like spoken word, you know what I mean? Or Christian rap, Christian crowd. You have to really know your audience, but that's how you find your audience too, is you have to try put it out there. And if you're getting some negative feedback, but anybody who's like, shouldn't be malicious, right? If someone's being malicious saying you suck, that's horrible feedback. That's like, there's something else internally going on with that person. If someone's like, hey, I really like your voice, but I don't like the way you're doing this or something, and actually giving you some criticism with some detail, I take that stuff in, and that's the stuff I'm like, okay, cool, thank you. And you could either change it, or you can see what other people say as well. But I said, I'm looking for more people that like give me some detail or something. If someone's saying something like horrible or saying trash, like I know that's like the biggest word. Someone put trash or something like that's not positive feedback. That's someone that has some internal shit going on with them, and they're just a negative type person. That's how I look at them. But you have to put your stuff out there. And I would say, even as an artist, even in the beginning, you have to learn marketing too, because that's how you find your audience. You know what I mean? So.
Awesome. Yeah, great stuff. So in terms of the opportunities that are like kind of opening up right now, one way that I look at the industry is that it's sort of like catching waves. We're like surfers in the sense that certain opportunities, like the internet, when the internet first came out, sort of like a big wave in the ocean. And if you swim along with it, then you can kind of hit that momentum when it's first coming out. You might get a boost. And there's a lot of opportunities that have already passed, and we might spend a lot of time and energy trying to catch up to something that isn't quite the opportunity that it used to be. Like, I don't know, like radio, for example. I'm curious right now. Right. So I'm wondering, what if you kind of sense anything right now? Like generally, I love to take the approach of imagining that we're surfers, we're sitting on the waves, and
Mhm.
you can start to feel some of those waves that are coming or some of those trends. And if you swim along with them at the right time, then you have this opportunity that like you can really gain some massive momentum or boost.
Mhm.
And in a lot of cases, like you described with the internet, the online thing,
Yeah.
it can be challenging because there's not a lot of proof. There's not a lot of evidence yet that the thing is a thing because it's an upcoming wave.
Right.
But if you are in tune with it, you can use those opportunities to get more, get a boost. So that's a long-winded way of asking, what do you see right now as like some of the biggest trends or opportunities that if you were starting from scratch and you were looking to grow your audience and build a
Mhm.
successful music career that you'd go all in on?
Well, some of the things I didn't have, well, I did have them. I just didn't know that, but is I didn't educate myself. So like a lot of things that like I could have had, I didn't know what they were. So like I didn't know, understand publishing. I didn't understand what management did. I didn't know what record labels really did. I just thought it's like doing music, get signed, rich, you know what I mean? Or whatever. I think,
That's not how it works.
yeah. So there's such a wide array right now of education, even like through modern musician and stuff, where you can get that education to understand what you're doing. Because if you know what you're doing, first and foremost, you're going to be able to, when you get an opportunity, you can walk in there and feel confident about it, right? So if like
Hmm.
even to say you got a chance to work with a songwriter, and the songwriter happens to have maybe a couple placements out there, you're going to know going in there like, hey, I need to do a split sheet. Let's make sure everything's fair. This is going to be the publishing splits. Make sure I'm signed up with BMI or ASCAP or CSEC or whatever. That some of those things are I probably had hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from me, or even just that I didn't collect because I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean? So
Wow.
I think first and foremost, you have that now. You have you can go to YouTube right now and tell you how to copyright my music. You know what I'm saying? Like I had to go like get a book, like all you need to know about the music business or something, or you have courses that you could take, and they're cheap, you know. So
Hmm.
those are first and foremost of the best opportunities. The second is you do have the internet and you have social media and stuff, and it doesn't hurt to reach out to people, but don't just reach out to artists, right? If you want to, like, I see a lot of people, even producers, are like, oh, I reached out to, Justin Bieber and I never got a response. I'm like, dude, first, Justin Bieber is not running his own messages on Instagram or whatever. First thing, try to find the manager, right? Try to find a manager or somebody close that is tied to him, and then maybe reach out to them and maybe give them an opportunity first. I always like to give value before. I don't just ask, right? I'm not going to say, hey, I got some beats. Can I send them to you? I might be say, hey, I got some, something I could do for you. I'm really good at graphics or something. If I do a cool graphic for you, would you mind listening to some beats or giving them to Justin Bieber or something? And Justin Bieber might be someone hard to reach out to. So I'll just give you an example. Maybe shoot a little bit lower, but and then if that doesn't work, then you could reach out to songwriters, right? Find the songwriters that write for Justin Bieber. They sometimes don't have the biggest following, and they're the ones that might reach out and be like, hey, it's cool. Send me some of your music. Maybe we can do some collaborations or something. You know what I mean? And people think like, oh, that's just too hard. And, there's only like few songwriters I can find, but I'm talking about one artist. Just think about all the artists out there and all the connections that they have to them. Just if you find just one connection and they get to listen to your music, you just won. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So that's a big opportunity there. And then I'm a firm believer, if you build it, they will come. Everything we have pretty much is free, like social media and stuff. Now there are sites that putting up your music costs you maybe a monthly charge or something. But if you believe in your music and you have good music and it's kind of just going out there and blowing up, people are going to come to you. That's if you didn't hear anything from my story, I just was in my parents' basement, just making music by myself, sometimes in my underwear, right? And people would message me and come to me and say, hey, I'd like to work with you. I love your stuff. You know what I mean? I'm still a firm believer in that. Like so many people are just like, oh, I got to get to the right record label. And I'm like, you don't have to get to a label. Just build it yourself and people will come, So I hope
Hmm.
that answered the question.
Yeah, yeah, that's super valuable. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's something about that mindset shift from when you flip from like chasing to more like attracting,
Yeah.
and building something that, and this definitely applies to marketing as well, like inbound marketing versus outbound marketing. But in terms of leverage, if you reach out to like 100 people that takes an enormous amount of time and energy. And you start where you start. So like sometimes it's good to connect with people and to reach out that way. But the response rate is extremely low when it's unsolicited versus
Right.
if you have an inbound strategy where you're providing value up front, and the value is the thing that is attractive. Then you focus on creating value and
Mhm.
building a system around it. I also really appreciate the point that you brought up around how do you network and actually connect with some of these more established artists.
Yeah.
And maybe the best strategy isn't to reach out directly to them, because they're so inundated already with people reaching out, and
Exactly.
they have their own sources of trust, trusted connections that they already have. And it does seem like that's maybe an untapped opportunity, is just figuring out who are the connections that they have to reach out to, that maybe they don't have as much, they're not saturated with people reaching out to them. And so if you provide value to them, then you can start to build a relationship and start to network and connect with
Exactly. It's
some.
the same thing as like when I lived in LA. It's just you meet somebody who happens to be the friends of this person, and then you end up saying, "Hey, I do music." And they're like, "Cool, man. Well, I actually am friends with this person." And like, what do you do? I was like, "Oh, I make beats, bro. Give me some beats. I'll send it to send it to them." I've gotten so much stuff by that, and I know a lot of people have gotten things like that of that nature. But now it's like everybody has Instagram or Twitter or whatever. Like now you can just reach out to them and like. But I said, but give value. Don't just, hey, I do music, let me send you something. Like it's just, I'm like, God. So and then some people like will message me and say, hey man, I'm a new producer, and give me their story or something, and then I'm like, all right, that sounds cool, I'll listen to your beats, you know what I mean? And if they're really good, I might be like, hey man, I'll do a collab with you or something, no problem. And not everybody's like that.
Cool.
Not everybody likes to help people though, so I'll just tell you that right now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a core mindset shift that I think is extremely valuable when it comes to networking, is what you
Mhm.
described of you focus on providing value first.
Yeah.
And just that one shift that you do already puts you in the top, like 5% of people are reaching out, because instead of it being like, gimme, 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 or me, it's about providing value to them. And that just comes across really easily. I'm curious if you have any other recommendations for, like, maybe we imagine, I know you get a lot of people reaching out to you, for
Mhm.
example.
Yeah.
What is sort of the iconic, like, worst reach out that you see over and over and over again that is like the wrong way to do it, versus like the best quality reach outs that you've received, that you
Yeah,
receive?
the worst is, I'm the best and you need to work with me. Everybody that I know, I have a fan base, everybody tells me I'm the shit or something, or like I am the shit and you need to work with me, and like you're telling me I need to work with you, right? It's
Mm.
it's just a different approach, or it's just like, I mean, how many times we all hear that, like, oh, I'm the best at what I do and you need to work with me and stuff like that. Or they'll insult you and say, "Oh, you got to be stupid not to work with me." Oh man, I was like, all right,
Mm.
I guess I'm dumb. And then you have the people, like I said, that will come with either some value or say, "Hey, I do this on the side." It could be anything. It could be like, "Hey, this guy, he does like custom Nikes. He does like Nike Air Force Ones with like Gucci and Louis Vuitton shit on there, and I'm really into like shoes." So he reached out to me. He's like, "Man, I'd love to work with you. This is what I do as a side gig." And he sent me all this shit. I'm like, bro, like, yeah, I'm into that. I would definitely want to help you, because he found something I was into. And I'm like, all
Mm.
right, I could definitely help you there because I'm into what you're doing. You know what I mean? Or it could be, if you do graphics, or, a lot of artists don't understand, you're also a songwriter, right? If you write your own stuff, you're a songwriter. That's another thing you could do. Like sync placements is a huge, I mean, there's so many jobs out there that pay up to like huge money, that all you have to do is just, you're creating a song, but for somebody else, right? And I know sometimes it's hard as an artist and as a producer, like, I don't want to give this up. This is like mine. This is my baby. But you're going to lose that after a while. Sometimes you're like, all right, I'm not using this. Like, here you go. So yeah, maybe lead up this. Hey, I'm a songwriter. I write choruses. I notice you sell beats. Like, why don't I do some choruses? Could I do a couple choruses for you, just so you can hear them? If you like them, we could sell them together, And now you're
Mm.
working with somebody that actually is working in the industry too. So if I make something that's, I think, is huge with that person, I'm like, all right, I'm going to pitch this to whoever. Like, I just did Tech Nine's album that's coming out here this year, and I did like 13 on there. And like, what if that one of those people reached out to me and I did a chorus and I happened to give that to Tech? You know what I mean? So.
Mm. Hmm.
I'd say that's the best, the value stuff, or or the story. If you give me a sad enough story, not it doesn't have to be sad, but if you give me a cool story, sometimes I read into it. I'm like, all right, man, I'm gonna give this person a chance to listen to something. So not everybody's
Hmm.
like that, but yeah.
Hmm. Awesome. So I want to take things in a little bit of a different direction because I'd be curious to hear your perspective on it. But right now, you were sort of in this age of AI and
Yeah.
generative tools. ChatGPT came out, a little over a year ago and changed
Right.
the game. Midjourney for images, and now DALL-E 3 is incredible. So about a week ago, Sora got announced with the video generation, and that's a whole can of worms in terms of like
Oh yeah.
high fidelity videos, especially in like a political year. Will be interesting to see what happens. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts as it relates to like beat generation and musicians and us as creators. Like,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of fear right now that like, oh, like, are we going to get replaced? And I'm curious what you see the role of musicians and us being creators and building communities
Mhm.
and potentially around creating things for like creating beats for other artists. What kind of
Yeah.
impact does AI and generative tools make on this industry?
Well, first thing I was going to say is do not go into it with fear, because fear is going to make you not do your passion, right? You're going to just make an excuse not to do what you want to do, right? So
Mm.
yeah, of course you have that. I have it in the back of my head too. I'm like, I'm going to embrace it, right? I've already have, like, AI has been around forever. It's just not maybe not where it is now, but even with beat making, like we can
Mm.
go online and get like 50 million loops and change the instrument and do all kinds of stuff. That's kind of an AI thing, you know what I mean? Which was cool for me. And I was always like the guy who's like, I'm not using loops. Like, I'm a real producer. This is bull. And then found out like Timberland and Neptunes are using loops and shit. I'm like, I'm the idiot, like sitting there doing all my percussion. I'm like, hey, that's a cool percussion loop. So I've always embraced stuff. If we feared everything, even in music that came along, then like streaming and like legal downloads, that would have killed all of us. We'd be like, I'm done. There's no reason. There's no more money out there, right? But I think passion keeps us going. Like, as far as like how it would affect me, I don't think it's going to affect me as much in like as far as like working in the industry, because I think people still want that human touch, right? So people still want to get in the studio, and not everybody, but I'm saying like some of the bigger artists want to get in the studio. They want that producer to guide them along, or give them that production that's catered towards them. So I don't think that's ever going to stop with that. It might get a little bit worse. Some people might get some AI beats. Online, I think that's because you don't have the same type of connection. We're talking through email or social media. I think that artists don't have, they're not sitting there talking with you. So they might go to, Beat AI or something and go make their own beat or something. And if I don't know if they're going to do this, but I'm pretty sure AI is probably not going to keep the publishing on it either. So if as an artist, they're like, hey, I get 100% publishing because all I had to do is pay, $20 a month to use this beat software that makes it for me. But I think we're far from beats being like so good that it's like, oh my gosh, I've heard a lot of them. So like I have friends that have tried out this stuff and they're like, they sound like a little kid just making beats, you know what I mean? But I think one day they will be there, but I still think it's going to have a human touch. It's going to have like a Timberland or somebody that's going to feed information to it and give it, hey, this is how I create this. This is the instruments I use. And then you'll be able to like create beats around like maybe Timberland or Metro, but that might be a cool thing. What if it's like producer based AI where it's like, all right, you're getting Wishmaster stuff now, but it's like my software. You're still going to get my touch, but it's going to, it might be monthly, or you're buying the software outright or whatever it's going to be. I still think the AI is never going to not have that human touch with stuff. I mean, eventually, of course, maybe 10, 15 years, it might just, we're all screwed, but I embrace this stuff. I always have. A lot of my friends they don't produce anymore because they didn't like how things happen. Even like, think about engineers. When Pro Tools came, a lot of them quit. They're like, I'm not doing this shit. Like, I'm an analog guy. And the guys that stuck with the Pro Tools, or girls, they are the ones killing it. They're the ones like, the Mannies and stuff. They're like, yeah, do it all in the box. Like, this is easier for me and it sounds great, So.
Yeah, that's a great way to approach change. Seems like that's one of the constants of life is like evolution and change. And it doesn't seem like it generally fares well for anyone that resists change.
No, it doesn't.
It's almost like that's the wrong side of the battle, almost always.
Now we might turn into a world of like Terminator where, they turn against us, or, I don't know if you've seen the movie Wall-E where everybody's overweight going on like these little scooters and, That might
Yeah.
happen. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, hopefully those are like red flags or warning signs for us to like help, avoid, that, you know, creating that. But I also think that there's like, a beautiful thing about being human is that we can create things. We can create the future. We can
Yeah,
decide what do we want our lives to be like.
exactly. And
And it
if you
definitely
think
seems
about it,
like,
AI is going to be, of course they're going to be able to create whatever, but there's going to be there's so much music out there. There's going to be so many lawsuits. I mean, just think about AI. I don't think it'd ever be perfect and not be connected to some other song or something, or make something similar where you're going to be able to do that. But I'm sure
mhm.
they can make AI software too. That's going to be able, I mean, I think that there actually already is, but it could basically go online and read every single song on there on YouTube, on any platform, and be able to break down the percentage of what was used from another song. It's crazy. So
Yeah,
that's already out there. So
I think it's super interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think you can make the case that as humans, like we're all influenced by our favorite artists, and
right.
it's not possible for us to look at the songs that we wrote and be like, okay, 7% of this came from Tech Nine, and 20% of this came from my
Yeah.
other favorite. It's because it's like we kind of like a recipe. We take these different pieces, but it creates something new, like different DNA strands, or like two parents like coming together, but they create a new child. And I think there's something interesting happening with AI too, where like it's kind of works in a similar way. Like they're starting to see these emergent properties that is greater than the sum of its parts. Like it's not
Yeah.
directly like taking pieces, but it certainly was like influenced or inspired by it. And yeah, the idea that you could actually have like a percentage based, like, this was 3.2%
Right.
Coldplay is interesting.
It'll be easier too, because then, like with lawsuits and stuff, you won't have to go to court, and you won't have to have like human judges be like, oh, let's break this down, and like, oh, blurred lines, this is, whatever. Now it'll be, put through the
Mm.
software. The software will give you exact percentages. Yeah,
Mm.
here 20%, and it'll be easier. Now we can at least rely on that and say, okay, all right, I owe
Mm.
20%, not just I have to pay all this money out for the song.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, like looking at it as a spectrum or like a scale. If you had like a percentage base where it was like, okay, this is just like 49.99% is like the amount that you can be similar, but you
Uh,
can't be closer than that. Or maybe it's like 20%.
or you just
Um,
be like Kanye West and just go sample whatever you want and don't clear it. I don't know if you saw. There's like
um,
all these lawsuits coming out now. Donna Summers and Ozzy Osbourne and all. Yeah,
uh-oh.
it's getting
Yikes.
crazy. Yeah,
Um, one point that you brought up that I think is really important is around the role of human creativity, the whole role of human creativity, even if we have these tools that allow
yeah,
us to like create things in an amazing way. Like it's sort of like just because you have a paintbrush that is a tool that allows you to like transform something into artwork or into the canvas, it's like a paintbrush, and it still is like about you communicating what's in your brain to like to create something with it meaningful. And it's like the message, like what the artwork that you're trying to portray, that's the most important part. And so it does seem like these AI tools probably are moving us in the direction where it's much easier to become a creator. Like even people who aren't traditionally musicians or know how to play an instrument
well,
will be
yeah. If you
able
think about it,
to.
auto tune is AI.
Mhm.
Auto tune made a bunch of non-singers singers, right? And there's,
Mm.
I mean, that was a huge. It still is. It's a huge trend for years of people using auto tune and basically putting them in key. You know what I mean? But there's different types of art. You have like the Futures, and you have the T-Pains, and all these different
Mm.
artists that are using it in their own way. So it's not like there was one person that had that sound, right? It was just
Mm.
everybody's using it, but they still had their own style to it. I still, like I
Awesome.
said, there's still that human touch to it, right?
Yeah. Yep. So lean into it and bring, who you are, bring your creativity, make it unique. And using these tools, isn't something necessarily to be afraid of, but it's something to lean into. Awesome. All right. Well, one thing I'd love to do, and granted that we did overcome some technical issues at the beginning here, so I'm sort of knocking
Yeah.
on wood that this is going to work as
Okay.
planned, but I think it should work based on the way that we've set this up now. I'd love to invite our community, if you're here live and you have a question that you'd like to ask to Wish, feel free to click on your profile and raise your hand, and we'll bring you onto the stage. All right. So I see Vaz raise his hand. So let's bring on Vaz. Hey, Vaz, how are you doing today?
Doing wonderful. Hello. You
Okay,
know
What's going
me,
on?
always full of questions, man.
yes, you got
This
it.
is
Woo!
This is fabulous.
Oh my God! Woo, that is peaked. Sorry.
I was like, what is that?
Wishmaster, I just put in the chat, adapt and survive, refuse and lose. Technology is just a transition from one thing to another. And I really appreciate your advice about facing the fear. Just continue to do what you do, keep on going. One of the things that what Michael's brought into our world, into mine specifically, is this a mentor that will helps us navigate into building a dependent client base through various technologies. And he diligently works with his team to improve and adapt. I was to hear what you were talking about being in your parents' basement. And I was just curious, you were kind of in the infancy of this technology and you persisted, and I'm sure you faced much fear. But now it's matured into where beats have become an industry, which it wasn't before you, or it was a very small industry.
A lot smaller.
And
definitely.
now Michael is actually pioneering, bringing the independent musician to the marketplace of building a community through the various tools. And not only is he giving us an opportunity to connect directly, but he has also started to encourage us to use some AI tools to help with our creativity. So not so much for me, but what advice would you give Michael, and modern musician, as he's trying to pursue and do this on behalf of all of us? And that's all I've got.
Yeah, for anything, I'd say
tomorrow, Mike.
Yeah, I'd say Michael's actually doing that's exactly what he should do. He's embracing and telling you, hey, you could use this. Like, even for me, I write a lot of my own emails, but I've been using Chat GPT a little bit just to like help me with like subject lines sometimes, or even rewriting stuff, because I'm like, I'm just a producer. I'm not like this well-spoken dude, right? So I'm like, all right, this is kind of cool. And if you think about it, even though I don't like it's going to hurt people's jobs. Of course, there's going to be people like, but it's going to help your business as well, right? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys are entrepreneurs. So just think about that. You don't have to pay somebody to do your copy or do this and do that, because you're going to have help, so you could do it all yourself. So if anything, I'd say what Michael's doing is awesome, because some people are going to shy away from that. And he's like, no, we need to do this ourselves. And everybody, he's saying, hey, you try this tool. This tool is going to help you here. Because if you think about it, we only have so much time in a day. So if we spend all our time doing, like, let's say, like if I spend too much time like reading all my emails and then, having to deal with some kind of issue with audio or something, I won't have time to create anymore. So now it's like he's basically giving you stuff where you can actually have more time to create, right? And that's what we all want to do deep down, right? That's what we're in this for. So I said, go Michael.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the question, Vaz. That was a very selfless question for you to come in here and ask on behalf of modern musician and what we're all doing here. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's definitely an interesting time to be alive as it relates to AI. And just yesterday we had a chance to really geek out and talk about Neuralink and like neural interfaces and Vision Pro, like some of the 3D stuff that's happening right now. But I do want to kind of bring things back to a point that Wysh brought up early on that I think is extremely important. And it's something that having the opportunity to have a lot of conversations with successful people like Wishmaster, you start to see some of the patterns that come up over and over and over again. And I really appreciated the lesson that you shared earlier about trusting yourself and trusting your own way. And like ultimately, it is extremely helpful to have references and have a role model. And it's probably the best way to start out, just start out with a reference. But there is sort of a shift that needs to happen at a certain point where it's like you do trust yourself and you don't necessarily believe anything anyone says at face value. Like it's sort of about experience, and it's about like trying it. Because sometimes even if something works for someone else, it may or may not work for you too. So I just encourage everyone that's here as well, to like everything that I say, everything that all of our guests say, like this is one perspective or one map, and it's extremely valuable. But also, like Wish brought up at the first, at the beginning of this interview, it's really important to find your own way and to kind of create your own map, and you'll discover things that are unique to you, and then you can share your map with other people as well. But yeah, it's important not to believe any one thing is like the ultimate truth.
And just to add on to that too, is you might create music now that maybe is like, maybe it's getting like a little bit of hate or something now, but maybe in 3 years it's going to be like the number one sound, right? Like if you think, I'll use Nelly as an example. Like he did an album his first album is called Country Grammar, and when they first put it out, everybody's like, this nursery rhyme. I mean, this dude's doing gangster shit to nursery rhymes. And they didn't like buy into it. It wasn't until 3 years later when it got picked up by a label and then turned out to be 20 million records sold, over 20 million records sold. So just because it's happened to me too, where I've had production where people are not really into it, but like a couple years later, they're like, damn, this is crazy. Like you have your own sound. Like, dude, I did this 2 years ago. Like, you know what I mean? Sometimes that happens. So just keep that in mind.
Super interesting. Awesome. Well, hey, let's go ahead and let's wrap up the interview for today. So let's do a virtual round of applause to Wishmaster for taking the time to come on here and share some of his insights and lessons that he learned. This is awesome. I appreciate you, sharing your story and also talking about the future and kind of where things are moving towards. For anyone that's interested in connecting more or going deeper into what you offer in terms of beat creation and all of your resources, what would be the best place for them to go to connect more?
I said just go to my website, just wishmasterbeats.com, WYSH masterbeats.com, or just Instagram, Wyshmaster Beats. So
awesome. All right. Yeah.